My name is SARA RADCLIFFE, and I'm Vice Chair and Secretary of the Board of Advisors for Methane Action.
What is it that you actually do there? Can you just describe the work that you do?
Yes, so trying to think of something that Daphne will not say. Okay, just say it. All right.
Don't worry about it.
All right. At Methane Action, we're looking for ways to support scientists who are exploring methane removal technologies.
And the work that you did in the past, can you just talk a little bit about the work that you did in the past and if there's any kind of common thread between the work that you've done in the past and the work that you do now?
Sure. I've spent my life in healthcare policy, and what I was really focused on was regulatory and reimbursement issues for novel drugs and biologics and devices. And so there's a commonality with what I do at Methane Action because we're looking for ways to support the research, development, and deployment of innovative technologies that will help heal the climate.
Okay. What are the challenges that come with that?
There are many challenges that are associated with innovative technologies in general. In healthcare policy, we encountered concern about the new uses of biotechnology science to develop drugs. Now, most of those drugs are, most cancer drugs, for example, use the techniques of biotechnology. And I think that people have come to understand and be comfortable with those techniques much more so than they were in the past. But when they first emerged, they were extremely concerning. In effect, on the healthcare side, we were using small stretches of DNA inserted into a mammalian cell to make products that could not be synthesized in a lab. The advent of those products really changed the landscape for many conditions, arthritis and cancer and many, many others. But when they first emerged, there were concerns, and we had to, we needed to engage in discussion with activists, with religious groups, with patient groups, in order to explain what we were doing and lay the groundwork for future innovation.
And the type of challenges along, in parallel to that, the type of challenges in terms of the work being done on methane action, methane removal.
Sure. Methane removal is one of many areas of technology that could come under the umbrella of carbon removal. And a number of constituencies are very concerned about that because they connect it with the term geoengineering. And geoengineering, I think understandably, is of concern to many because we can all think about episodes in the history of science where something has been done and it has had unexpected effects. When in my past life in healthcare policy, we were dealing with concerns about creating new products in a fermentation vat, in a lab. And I understand why people had concerns even in that constrained environment. Now we're talking about innovative technologies deployed in our climate, the climate that belongs to all of us. And I can see why that would be very concerning. And so I've encountered some of the same types of thinking that I did in the healthcare policy world. Again, I understand it because new technologies are always concerning. But I would always want to remind people that it is these new technologies that have made such extraordinary advances in the treatment of disease on the healthcare side. We now have a planet which is on the verge of, if it hasn't already passed, the point of no return when it comes to the climate and the survival of our species. And so while we have to direct appropriate caution toward these technologies and think about ways to test them, methods for environmental assessment, approaches to consulting those who will be affected. We're at the point now where we really have to make the most of the opportunities provided by these technologies to heal the climate and make it possible for our species and others to live here going forward.
Could I just get one reiteration of that in maybe just a short statement that it's, we're in a situation, so, and I'm not putting words into your mouth.
Oh no, please.
I understand what you said.
Yes, yes.
That it's, it's a compromise, or maybe not a compromise, but we have to be so cautious of the fact that we've got to be careful as we go, but mindful of the pending disaster that we've got on the horizon.
Right.
At least the tipping point.
Yes. How shall I put this? It has become very clear that we are now at the point where we will surpass the 1.5 degrees C of warming, which was the target set by the Paris Agreement. And even if we were to hit that target, there are going to be a lot of crises and emergencies for people around our planet. And so I think we all have to understand that the time has come to look at new technologies that could help remove greenhouse gases, including methane, from the atmosphere. Because if we don't, we are either not going to survive at all, or many, many of our fellow citizens around the world are not going to be here with the climate emergency that is pressing on us.
Can we just talk personally about how you feel about this, and how you see the future of your future, and maybe if you have family, their future?
I grew up in Canada, and in the 1970s, when I was growing up, my memories were of, in the winter, playing in the snow. We had snowball fights. We made snow angels. We built forts that were taller than we were. And of course, we were kids, but we were able to build forts that were big enough for us to stand up in. Is it okay?
I'm sorry, Zara, if you could just talk again about your personal experience and your thoughts about where we're at, where we're going.
When I was growing up in Canada in the 1970s, my memories of the winter are memories of snow. We were able to make snow angels and have snowball fights all winter. We were able to make snow forts that were bigger than we were. And of course, we were little people, but we were able to stand up inside the snow forts. When a really big blizzard came, as they did often quite far into the spring, we had great fun tying a string from our house to the next door neighbor's house so that we could find our way through in the blizzard. In the 80s, as I went to college, and then subsequently as I went to grad school, I realized that was no longer happening. And I could get home without much difficulty, without having my plane diverted by snowstorms. And it slowly began to dawn on me just how much things have changed. My own mother just recently said, we don't get those kinds of snowstorms anymore. In fact, we barely get any snow. And so I've seen that in my lifetime, as have many of us. A dramatic change just in the environment that we're familiar with from when we grew up. More recently, I guess just reading the news, one comes to understand how close we are now to a tipping point from which we cannot return. With the coastal flooding and the hurricanes and the droughts, the earth is speaking to us. And I think over recent years, it's just, even though my life's work has been in health policy, it's become clear to me that if there's one thing we all need to work on, it's climate.
And on an emotional level, How does that make you feel?
When I first met Daphne Weisham, I'll do that again. When I first met Daphne Weisham, the CEO of Methane Action, I would describe my own attitude as one of climate despair and climate fatigue, which many of us are feeling. I'm still terrified, really, when I think about what's going on with regard to climate, and particularly what's going on with regard to methane in the Arctic, the specific issues that we work on at Methane Action. That terror, that fear, though, is balanced with some optimism now, because one of the things that I've been learning more and more about is the technologies that can be brought to bear to address the climate crisis. And so while I understand that many have sort of felt like they need to throw up their hands and say, there's nothing we can do, there are things that we can do. And so I've found my own mood turned from that sense of fatigue, that sense of despair, to a sense of, if we all work together, there is a way for us to make it from where we are to where we need to be, as long as we are all focused on that mission of restoring our climate and averting the kind of climate crises that we're seeing now around the world.
That's great.